Call the meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to the November 15th, 2022 Post Falls City Council meeting. Shannon, please note that all council members are present except for Mr. Walker, and he's excused again tonight. Under ceremonies, announcements, appointments, we do have two announcements. City Hall and city business offices will be closed Thursday, November 24th and Friday, November 25th in observance of Thanksgiving. Police, fire, and rescue services for life-threatening or in-progress emergencies may be reached by calling 911. The police department will be open for walk-in emergencies. For water department emergencies, call 208-773-3517. The annual Winterfest and Plaza Market is Friday, December 2nd from 4 to 8 p.m. 4 to 8 p.m. here at City Hall. The plaza will be bustling with holiday festivities for all ages, including the lighting of the community Christmas tree and a visit from Santa. For more information, visit the city's website postfalls.gov. Are there any declarations of conflict tonight? Seeing none. Are there any amendments to the agenda?
There are none tonight, sir.
I skipped over that one, I'm sorry. Would you please present the consent calendar?
Item A is minutes from the November 1st, 2022 City Council meeting. Item B is payables October 25th through November 7th, 2022. Item C is Farmdale Avenue and Fennicus Street grants of easement and rights-of-way. Item D is Millworks Phase 1 Construction Improvement Agreement Addendum. Item E is Far West Steel Annexation Reasoned Decision. Item F is reallocation of opioid settlement funds. Item G is the Gabori Annexation Reasoned Decision. Item H is request to surplus one digital intelligence Fred computer by the police department. And item I, place annexation decision. And item K is cybersecurity contract. It's being presented by the police department, but it's for the entire city. So listed on here, it says for the police department. In the memo, it's clear that it's for the entire city.
Any questions on the consent calendar?
I would move to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Ziegler,
Aye.
Shove,
Aye.
Thorson,
Aye.
Borders,
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Tonight we have no public hearings. Next item on the agenda is unfinished business, returning ordinances and resolutions. And tonight we do have one ordinance, the Froehlich zone change.
So this is where I move.
Yep.
I move to place the ordinance Froehlich zone change file number ZC-225 on its first and only reading by title only while under suspension of the rules.
Second.
Motion seconds for further discussion. Roll call, please.
Shove,
Aye.
Thorson,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Borders,
Aye.
Ziegler.
Aye. Motion passes. Mr. Wilson.
An ordinance of the City of Post Falls, a municipal corporation of the state of Idaho, providing for a change in zoning classification for the land described in Section 1 of this ordinance from single-family residential R1 to medium-density residential R2, providing for amendment of the official zoning map to reflect this change, providing that all prior zones applicable to lands described in Section 1 are hereby superseded, and providing an effective date.
I move to approve the ordinance Froehlich zone change file number ZC-22-5 and to direct the clerk to assign the appropriate number and that it be published by summary only.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion. Roll call, please.
Shove,
Aye.
Thorson,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Borders,
Aye.
Ziegler.
Aye. That motion passes. Thank you. Next item on the agenda tonight is new business, and the first item is the 2023 legislative session priorities.
So in your packet is a memo regarding the legislative priorities that staff has recommended to council to accept. We haven't done this in the past. In the past, the staff has just kind of worked as legislation has come through, and then we update you as we're presenting that legislation. We're either in favor or opposed to the legislation. But this year, we thought we'd actually set some priorities. The Association of Idaho Cities does have a meeting on November 29th that Warren Wilson, are you going down there?
I believe I am.
Okay. And down there will represent what we are in favor of or not in favor of as far as legislation goes. This year, we are in favor of recommending one of our priorities be some kind of effective property tax relief. And we talked a little bit about that in the workshop, that the shifting of property taxes from the commercial to residential is significant, especially in this last year. And so recommending something along the lines of either indexing the homeowner's exemption again or looking at a leveling of the market values over a time frame in order to help reduce the amount of spike that we're seeing on that tax shift. The second priority is retaining the penalties and interest on delinquent property taxes. Again, that's one that we've talked about a little bit, but Kootenai County decided as of October 1st, they were going to retain that late penalty and interest on the property taxes. We believe that that money belongs to us, as do a number of other local taxing districts. And so we're looking at a legislative update or change to allow the cities to retain those dollars. It's my understanding that highway districts and sewer districts, was that it? I can't remember, actually have it's clear in the state code that they get to retain those dollars. And so it's not 100% clear in our code currently, and we'd like to provide language to have it presented down at our legislature to adopt for us to retain those dollars. It is paid on, so if they owe if they owe the money to the city of Post Falls, the interest and penalty is calculated based on the amount owed to the city of Post Falls, as it is with each of the taxing districts.
I have a question on that, Shelley, if I could.
Yes.
So in the event the legislature does that we prevail and they clarify that language that the city can keep the penalties and interest, is it retroactive back to the arbitrary taking of the money?
It likely is not. We would have to wrestle with that with the county.
So that would be a separate action other than the legislative action.
Okay.
For the city of Post Falls, about 100,000 currently. That is dependent upon the number of folks who are not paying their property taxes. And so they owe late penalty and interest, which can vary year to year. But for last year, we looked at, I think, a 3-year span. It's about $100,000 to the city of Post Falls that the county is now retaining. And Rathdrum is going to take lead on that and help us with that. Their city administrator used to work for the Association of Idaho Cities, is quite familiar with the legislative process, and so they'll be taking lead and we'll be providing support, and other actions will be led by the city of Coeur d'Alene and the city of Post Falls. Another priority is limiting the period of time we're required to obtain police audio and video recordings. This becomes quite expensive for us to retain that data. And so we're looking to match up what the counties have. And Idaho Falls has also got some language, and I know Warren is working with them. Their language is a little bit more restrictive than ours,
Yeah,
I believe.
We would have to retain it a little bit longer. Honestly, I prefer the language that the counties currently have that we would like to have, but Idaho Falls is a bit further down the path than we are. They've been negotiating with other interested parties like the media representatives, the newspapers association. So given that they're further ahead, we thought it was wise to sort of let them take the lead on this. There was a meeting coming up actually today, and I haven't heard back how that went, between the lobbyists who are working on this for cities and the lobbyists working on it for the media entities. And so maybe tomorrow and the next day I'll have a sense of how that played out.
Thank you.
And I do apologize, within the memo, I noticed that SharePoint took all of our apostrophes and made them question marks, and so I will let Mike know
I
about
thought
that.
it was like new math. I just
Yeah,
caught that.
yeah. Not sure exactly why it would do that, but it did. Our final priority involves the area's city impact, and I am going to turn this over to Warren. He is more intimately aware of what's going on and had conversations with the with AIC and with their lobbyists regarding this particular endeavor. It focuses mainly out of the southern part of the state.
We often see potential bills that impact how annexations occur in the state. We haven't seen a major overhaul or a major change to the way annexations are done in 20 years, call it. There is a proposal pending this year that a senator is intending to bring that would radically change how annexations are done. And probably not in a good way. It would address issues that we don't really have, because in this neck of the woods, you don't see a lot of city-initiated annexations where the city goes out and says, you folks are coming in. You don't see that happening in this part of the state. You see that in other locations in the state where a city has grown up around an area, and then they bring that area in, because there's a sort of a level of fairness there that you're getting the same services, but you're not paying for it because you're not in the city, and so they'll annex them and bring them in. This legislation would seek to change that and make that, depending on how the final draft plays out, essentially that you don't have the authority to initiate annexation. It would only be if someone wants to ask in, and it would make the process for completing an annexation incredibly onerous, having to do studies and reports in the front end, publishing notice about how, and letting the county know what you're doing. It would also make the decision to annex a quasi-judicial decision, which would make it appealable. And so you would probably have to have reasons, criteria for why you're annexing or not. So we haven't seen a draft on that one yet, but it's something that is concerning. I don't think that we want to get into a boat where a judge is reviewing annexation decisions. That's just me, but I don't think that's a great move for cities. On areas of city impact, we are likely to see a bill. We've seen a draft. We know there's going to be some changes that would essentially allow you to only set your boundaries out 1 mile from your existing limits, or what you could conceivably annex, reasonably, very likely annex within 5 years. Problem is, it takes you decades sometimes to be able to plan and implement a plan to essentially extend utilities. There's something called a reasonably anticipated future need when you're dealing with water rights. As a municipal provider for water, we have an obligation to plan for the future. The guidance from the state is, and the legislation is, that you need to look out and say, how much future need for water rights are we going to have so that you can protect those rights for the long term. That can stretch out under guidance from the IDWR for potentially 20 to 50 years. If you are going to extend wastewater infrastructure, you can hold impact fees for 20 years to do that. And the legislation is looking at saying 5 years, that's it on your ACI. So it would not lend itself well to well thought out growth or decisions on how you're going to deal with growth. So there's some concerns about how that would play out and how it would impact cities. We want to make sure that whatever happens, we're not coming out of this in a way that sort of hamstrings us in how we try to make sure that we're in a position to reasonably plan for growth, so we're not being overwhelmed. And so those are the two other ones that are on our radar screen that we're more concerned about making sure bad things don't happen rather than pushing the ball forward necessarily.
And I want to thank, all the department heads support when it comes to the legislative topics that come forward. And if it's public safety related, then Chief McLean gets behind it. He will get his association behind it. If it's parks directed, David Fair would get behind it. But we do have a core committee that consists of Warren Wilson, and he's backed up by Field Harrington, and John Beecham. And then Rhiannon, my assistant, helps with a lot of the drafting of the language. And I think we do a better job of responding to the legislative actions that are occurring the last couple of years than we have in the past. And so I just want to thank them for all their help and forethought. And sometimes you read something and you think, okay, this affects the city in one way, and you'll forward that out to that group, and you get back multiple ways it's going to affect cities or other taxing districts that you hadn't thought of. And so having that group to volley stuff off is very helpful. And also, I know John has testified down to the legislature, so has Warren, and so having those folks that will testify when these bills come forward is very helpful too, because what we heard from some of the legislators as of last year was that the cities were not speaking up and being heard, which in fact is not true, but the more we are speaking up and being heard, the better.
And to echo that, Association of Idaho Cities sends out an update, and they take a position on virtually every piece of legislation that comes forward. So our voice is being carried forward, and for the legislators to say they don't hear from the city is somewhat difficult to believe, but they do a decent job for us.
So we have these priorities, and I think the action we were looking for was just support of those priorities going forward into this legislative season.
Yes.
How do we translate that into a motion, or do we have to?
Just a motion to support the legislative priorities would be sufficient.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion.
That's my line.
All those in favor? Sorry, take the roll, please.
Borders,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Shove,
Aye.
Thorson,
Aye.
Ziegler.
Aye. Thank you. I was thinking it was adjournment motion when we do that, but we'll finish the meeting first. Thanks, Shelley. Thanks, Warren. Next up, renaming of the community garden. Dave.
Mr. Mayor, Council, we don't do this too often, so this is kind of an interesting project here, but give you a quick background. Last spring during the workshop, Park and Rec Commission was looking at future parks, park names, and one of their discussion points came up with naming something after Rick Nordham, our former Park and Rec chair. And through that discussion, we talked about, what our policies are for renaming, because we take it very serious not to change them. Also, what parks were going to come up and what was appropriate to honor Rick. In that, they kind of zeroed in on the community garden. So in the July meeting, it came forward as a formal topic to discuss. They went through it and still felt strongly that it would make sense to name the community garden after Rick Nordham. Per our naming policy, we require a public comment period of 14 days. We actually put it out on the webpage for 30 days. At the last meeting, September 27th that they had, it came back as an action item. They discussed the topic once again. They looked at what the public comments were, or lack thereof. In this case, there were no comments that came back. And they brought forward a recommendation to you folks to name the Post Falls Community Garden after Rick Nordham, so the Rick Nordham Community Garden. The reason why it's appropriate for Rick is I looked at all of his projects. First of all, if you remember Rick and knew Rick, him and his wife were avid gardeners. And Rick was not just instrumental in it, but he was the driving force behind us getting a community garden. He worked on the fundraising. He got volunteers involved. He volunteered and his wife for 2 years, kind of supervising it, actually working in the garden. Got the Rotary behind building the building. It was a labor of love, that endeavor. So it really was appropriate. Staff concurred with Park and Rec Commission, their recommendation. Also the fact that the name of the garden, Post Falls Community Garden, is pretty generic. It's not like it's Treaty Rock based on a site or Hill to Kill a Log or anything like that. So the impact to change the name, we did not see it there and saw it as appropriate. So that's what's before you today, to either accept or reject the recommendation of the Park and Rec Commission.
I'd make a comment. I was involved with Rick through Rotary, through the church, a few other things. And he was a guy that if you needed something, Rick would get it done, or he'd make sure that there were other people around that would get it done. It was sometimes hard to keep up with him. He was just the Energizer Bunny. And when he got himself involved, he was involved 100%. And I think it's very appropriate, and I would strongly support the renaming.
I have to
Very
say.
well earned.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't mean to cut Lynn off.
I just said, I think it's very appropriate. He earned it.
Okay.
I loved seeing their yard, it wasn't that it was landscaping, it just was alive with floral. But yes, just a wonderful human, and I just think that is a great way to honor him.
Do I have a motion?
I'd move to approve the renaming of the community garden.
Second. Motion second. Further discussion. Shannon, please take the roll.
Malloy,
Aye.
Thorson,
Aye.
Shove,
Aye.
Borders,
Aye.
Ziegler.
Aye. Motion passed. Thanks. Thanks,
Thank
David.
you.
Thanks to the Park and Rec Commission, too. Next item on the agenda is citizens' issue, and this section of the agenda is reserved for citizens wishing to address the council regarding city-related issues that are not on the agenda. If anyone wishes to testify, please come forward. Seeing none. Administrative and staff reports. Tonight we have none.
We have none, but just got a quick email from our Public Works Director, and we wanted to let council know that we might need to have a special meeting regarding the compliance schedule with DEQ for the wastewater project. He is here if you guys have any quick questions
Should we just
on
tell him
that.
no?
Can we use the same schedule that we just,
So Shannon would reach out to you guys, either through a doodle poll or email to find out what your availability is to schedule that meeting.
Okay. I just try to make it easy for you. So yeah, just everyone look for the poll and response, we can get something set up.
They already have.
They already have.
Oh,
We already did,
We started setting it up for something else.
for something else.
oh,
We
okay,
can just
see,
use
there
that.
we
That
go.
the other one that you told us
Apparently we're
was
on the
off, it's now back on,
This is a different one.
just a different topic?
but it's the same time?
We're not sure on the time yet.
Okay.
But everybody has responded.
So efficient. Mayor and council comments, three things actually. The first, the tragedy that took place in Moscow. Three local young ladies who were the victims in that, along with another young gentleman. One from Post Falls, one from Coeur d'Alene, one from Rathdrum. It sounds like it's a very ugly situation. I know I talked with Chief. I reached out to the Moscow's mayor, expressing our sympathy and offering any assistance we could provide. And I know the chief has offered assistance as well as far as any help they might be able to provide on the investigation. So I would ask that you please keep those victims and their families in your thoughts and your prayers. It's a horrible situation. You hope it never happens, and unfortunately it did, and involved one of our own. Second, I was able to participate in the ribbon cutting for the Veterans Home, which was a tremendous turnout. They were limited to the number of people that could be in the main area because of weather. They had to move it inside, and so they had the inside section. And I think the governor asked Chief Ryan, he says, "Are we okay with the fire code in here?" And he says, "Yeah, I think we can make it work." But there were people lined up down the hallways and out. So it was a lot of people put in a lot of effort, a lot of work, a lot of financial contributions, especially the Jacqueline family. So it's wonderful to see the Veterans Home finally be open to provide a place for those who served our country so well. So that was wonderful. And my third is that with Thanksgiving coming up, I just want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. And despite the tragedies and the challenges we face, we all have very much to be thankful for. And ask that we all bear that in mind. And if we see someone that doesn't have as much to be thankful for, that we reach out and assist them in any way we can. So, council comments. No?
You covered it.
We do need an executive session tonight.
We do.
Well, I would move to enter into executive session pursuant to Idaho Code 74-2061C, require an interest in real property which is not owned by a public agency, and further that no action will be taken during the session, and that the session will last approximately, fill in the blank, 15 minutes.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion. Roll call, please.
Shove,
Aye.
Orders,
Aye.
Ziegler,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Thorson.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. We'll enter executive session. Call the meeting back to order. Are there any motions to come forward?
Adjourn?
To adjourn.
All those in favor? Aye. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.